Bright and shining star, I exclaimed in the delicious ecstasy that had ravished me. Incomprehensible product of eternal thought, you who alone, immobile in our eyes, have watched over half the earth since the first day of creation. You who guide the navigator on the deserts of the ocean, while a single glimpse of you has often restored hope and life to the sailor harried by the tempest. If it is true that whenever a clear night has allowed me to contemplate the sky, I have never failed to seek you out from among your fellow stars, assist me now, celestial light. Alas, earth abandons me. Be you today my counselor and my guide. Teach me in which region of the globe I must settle. During this invocation, the stars seemed to shine more radiantly and to rejoice in the sky, inviting me to draw near to its protective influence. I don't believe in presentiments, but I do believe in a divine providence which guides men by unknown means. Every instant of our existence is a new creation, the act of an omnipotent will. The inconstant order which produces the ever-new forms and the inexplicable phenomena of the clouds is determined, as regards every single moment, down to the most minute particle of water composing them. The events of our lives can have no other cause, and to attribute them to chance would be the height of folly. I can even affirm that it has sometimes been granted me to make out the imperceptible threads with which Providence manipulates great men like puppets, while they have the illusion that they are the ones conducting the world. A little impulse of pride whispered by Providence into their hearts is enough to make entire armies perish and to turn a whole nation upside down. Be that as it may, I believed so strongly in the reality of the invitation that I had been given by the pole star that my mind was made up at that very moment. I was heading north, and although I had in those remote regions no point of preference or any definite aim in mind, when I left Turin the next day, I came out through the palace gate, which is to the north of the city, convinced that the pole star would not abandon me. This was the point I had reached on my journey when I was obliged to get off my horse in rather a hurry. I wouldn't have mentioned this particular detail if I were not obliged in all conscience to instruct those people who would like to adopt this manner of traveling of the little drawbacks it involves, now that I've explained its immense advantages to them. Since windows in general were not invented for the new purpose I have assigned to them, the architects who construct them neglect to give them the convenient rounded form of a hunting saddle. The intelligent reader will, I hope, understand without any further explanation the painful cause that forced me to come to a halt. I climbed down, not without difficulty, and walked up and down the length of my room a few times to shake off the numbness, reflecting on the mixture of pleasures and pains that strew life's path, as well as on the kind of fate that renders men the slaves of the most insignificant circumstances. After this, I hastened to remount my horse, now provided with an eider-down cushion, something I would never have dared to do a few days before for fear of being jeered at by the cavalry. But since the day before I had at the gates of Turin met a band of Cossacks who had arrived on similar cushions from the borders of Palus Motus and the Caspian Sea, I decided that I could, without infringing the laws of horsemanship, for which I had the greatest respect, adopt the same custom. Delivered from the disagreeable sensation that I have intimated, I was able without any further worry to turn my thoughts to my planned journey. One of the difficulties that was giving me the biggest headache, since it involved my conscience, was that of knowing whether I was doing the right thing or the wrong thing in abandoning my fatherland, half of which had indeed abandoned me. Such a step seemed too important for me to decide on lightly. As I reflected on the word fatherland, I realized that I didn't have a very clear idea of what it meant. My fatherland? And what does my fatherland consist? Could it just be a collection of houses, fields, and rivers? That I can't believe. Perhaps it's my family and friends who constitute my fatherland. But they have already left it. I know, it's the government, but that has changed. Good Lord, so where is my fatherland? I wiped my face with my hand in a state of unutterable anxiety. The love of one's fatherland is such a powerful emotion. The regrets that I myself felt at the mere thought of leaving mine proved to me so clearly the reality of this idea that I would have stayed on horseback all my life long rather than abandon the attempt to vanquish this difficulty. I soon saw that the love of one's fatherland depends on a combination of several elements. In other words, on the way that over a long period of time man becomes accustomed from childhood onwards to individuals, his locality, and the government. All I needed to do now was to investigate the extent to which these three basic factors contribute, each in their own way, to making up the fatherland. Our attachment to our compatriots depends in general on the government and is nothing other than the feeling of strength and happiness it gives us in common. For real attachment is limited to our family and to a small number of individuals by whom we are closely surrounded. Everything which gets in the way of our habit of meeting one another, or the ease with which we do so, makes men into enemies. A mountain range creates populations on either side that treat those on the other side as foreigners and no longer love them. The people who dwell on the right bank of a river believe themselves to be quite superior to those on the left bank, and the latter in turn look down on their neighbors. This predisposition is evident even in big cities divided by a river, despite the bridges that yoke its banks. A difference of language separates men under the same government even more. Finally, even the family in which our real affections reside is often scattered across the fatherland. It is continually changing in shape and number. Furthermore, it can even be sent to live abroad. So it is neither in our compatriots nor in our family that the love of the fatherland essentially resides. Locality contributes at least as much to the attachment we feel for our native land. A question of considerable interest arises in connection with this point. It has always been remarked how mountain dwellers are, of all peoples, the ones who are the most attached to their countries, and that nomads generally live in the Great Plains. So what can be the cause of this difference in the attachment of different peoples to their locality? Unless I am mistaken, the reason is this. In the mountains, your fatherland has a definite shape and character. In the plains, it has no such thing. It's a faceless woman whom no one could love, whatever good qualities she might have. After all, what is left of his local country to the inhabitant of a wooden village, when that village is burnt down by the enemy passing through and the trees all cut down? The unhappy man seeks in vain all around the uniform line of the horizon some recognizable object that can evoke some memories in him. But there is none. Every point of space presents the same appearance to him and has the same interest. This man is a de facto nomad unless his habitual attachment to his government keeps him where he is, but his dwelling place will be here or there. It makes no difference. His fatherland, wherever the government is active. He will have but half a fatherland. The mountain dweller is attached to the objects he has had in front of his eyes ever since childhood. Objects that have visible and indestructible shapes. From every point in the valley he can see and recognize his field on the mountainside. The noise of the torrent rushing down between the rocks is never interrupted. The path leading to the village takes a detour around an immovable block of granite. He sees in his daydreams the outline of the mountains painted in his heart, just as when you have gazed for a long time at a stained glass window, you can still see it even when you close your eyes. The picture engraved in his memory is part of himself and will never be erased. Finally, even his memories are attached to his locality. But that locality must have objects whose origin is unknown and whose end one cannot foresee. Ancient buildings, old bridges, everything that is imbued with a character of grandeur and durability can partly replace mountains and inspire in their own way a love of one's locality. Nonetheless, the monuments of nature have more power over one's heart. To give Rome a worthy nickname, the proud Romans called it the city on 7 hills. Once you have acquired a certain habit, it can never be destroyed. The mountain dweller in his maturity can no longer feel any affection for the localities of a big city, and the city dweller can never go to live in the mountains. This may explain why one of the greatest writers of our day, who has depicted with genius the deserts of America, has found the Alps quite unimpressive and considers Mont Blanc to be much too small. The role played by the government is evident. It is the first basis of the fatherland. It is the government which creates a reciprocal attachment between men and makes the attachment they naturally feel for their locality even more vigorous. It alone, by its memories of happiness or glory, can attach them to the soil that saw their birth. Is the government good? Then the fatherland is at the height of its powers. Does it turn bad? Then the fatherland falls sick. Does it change? Then the fatherland dies. We then have a new fatherland, and anyone is free to adopt it or to choose another one. When the whole population of Athens left that city at the behest of Themistocles, did the Athenians abandon their fatherland, or did they take it along with them on their ships? When Coriolanus, good Lord, what an argument I've got involved in. I'm forgetting that I'm sitting astraddle my window. There was an old woman, a relative of mine, very witty. Her conversation was always very interesting, but her memory, both inconstant and fertile, often led to her leap from one episode to the next and from one digression to another, to such an extent that she was obliged to ask her listeners for their help. So what was it I was just telling you about? She would ask. And often her listeners, too, had forgotten, which plunged the whole assembly into indescribable perplexity. Now, it may have been noticed that the same thing often happens to me in my narrations, and I have to admit that, yes, the plan and order of my journey mimic exactly the plan and order of my aunt's conversations. But I'm not going to ask for anyone's assistance, since I've realized that my subject comes back of its own accord, and just when I'm least expecting it. The persons who will not be able to approve of my analysis of the fatherland should be informed that for some time already, sleep had been overpowering me despite my efforts to fight it off. However, I'm not at all sure now whether I really did go to sleep just then, and whether the extraordinary things that I'm going to relate were the effect of a dream or of a supernatural vision. I saw descending from the sky a brilliant cloud that gradually drew close to me and was covering, as if in a transparent veil, a young woman of 22 or 23 years of age. I would seek in vain for expressions to describe the feelings that the sight of her aroused in me. Her face, shining with kindness and benevolence, had the charm of the illusions of youth and was as sweet as dreams of the future. Her eyes, her tranquil smile, all her features indeed were the realization of the ideal being that my heart had been seeking for so long, and that I had despairingly thought I would never meet. As I gazed at her in delight and ecstasy, I saw the pole star gleaming between the curls of her black hair, which the north wind gently lifted, and at the same time words of consolation could be heard. Words, I say? No, rather the mysterious expression of a celestial mind revealing the future to my intelligence, while my senses were still in the shackles of sleep. It was a prophetic communication from the favorable star that I had just been invoking, and whose meaning I will attempt to express in human language. Quote, "Your trust in me will not be betrayed," end of quote, said a voice whose timbre resembled the sound of Aeolian harps. Quote, "Look, here is the countryside that I have kept for you. Here is the good to which men aspire. In vain if they think that happiness is a matter of calculation, and ask for earth what can only be obtained from heaven." At these words, the meteor returned to the depths of the sky, and the aerial divinity was lost to sight amid the mists of the horizon. But as she left, she looked at me with an expression that filled my heart with hope and trust. Immediately, burning with an ardent desire to follow her, I spurred on my steed with all my strength, and as I had forgotten to put on spurs, my right heel struck the corner of a tile with such violence that the pain woke me up with a start. The accident was of real benefit for the geological part of my journey, since it gave me the opportunity to find out exactly how high my room was above the layers of alluvium that form the soil on which the city of Turin is built. My heart was racing violently, and I had just counted 3.5 beats since the time I had spurred on my horse when I heard the sound of my slipper that had fallen into the street, which, once the time taken by heavy bodies in their accelerated fall and the time needed by sound waves of the air to rise from the street to my ears had both been calculated, gives the height of my window as 94 feet 3 inches and 9/10 of an inch from the level of the pavement in Turin. Supposing that my heart, shaken by this dream, was beating 120 times a minute, which cannot be far from the truth. It's purely for scientific reasons that I've made so bold as to mention my slipper after talking about the slipper of my lovely neighbor. So I warn you that this chapter is meant for scientists and for them alone. The bright vision I had just been vouchsafed made me feel all the more intensely when I awoke the full horror of the isolation in which I found myself. I looked all around me, and all I could see were rooftops and chimney pots. Also, hanging from the 5th story between heaven and earth, surrounded by an ocean of regrets, desires, and anxieties, I was clinging to life only thanks to the uncertain glimmer of hope, an imaginary support whose fragility I had experienced all too often. Doubt soon returned to my heart, still battered and bruised by life's disappointments, and I firmly believed that the pole star had been mocking me. This was an unjust and culpable mistrust, and the star punished me for it by making me wait for 10 years. Oh, if only I could have foreseen then that all those promises would be fulfilled, and that one day I would again find on earth the adored being whose image I had merely glimpsed in the heavens. Dear Sophie, if only I had merely glimpsed in the heavens. Dear Sophie, if only I had known that my happiness would surpass all my expectations. But I mustn't run ahead of myself. I return to my subject, unwilling as I am to reverse the strict methodical order which I am forcing myself to follow as I write the account of my journey.